Another impromptu video from me. This is just a continuation of the previous one. So Seletar line might not even end up being called Seletar line. It might just end up being called something even simpler, just Eastern Region line. Because in my previous video I talked about how the Seletar line's alignment has changed from the previously proposed one that cuts through Kallang and Marina South Pier to Prince Edward Road Station, Circle Line 6. Instead, they're going to shift the alignment way eastbound, eastwards I mean. So it would make more sense to call it this instead. So when you have this conceptually an Eastern Region line ERL that feeds like from Woodlands North to somewhere near Tampines or Bedok, then you don't need CRLe to do the job anymore. CRLe is just Cross Island Line extension from Pasir Ris to Punggol via Elias. So the thing about CRLe is that you just have to extend it by 2 more stations. So one at Punggol West and then the other one at Seletar Airport, which is the one that I labeled here. Because I have seen people proposing stuff like, we should make either this ERL or CRLe touch like either Khatib or Yishun, but honestly that's not even necessary because there are already lots of feeder buses that connect like Yishun to Yishun East. Like you got 801, you have 804 that passes by there, and then you have 806 as well. And not only that, you also have stuff like 103, 117, and stuff like that. So you don't necessarily need like another MRT line to connect to like Yishun or Khatib. Otherwise, it's just the construction is just gonna be a mess there. I would rather just like limit the construction of this supposed ERL to like Yishun Avenue 6 or 8, and that's honestly enough. And I've also heard like some people saying, will 117 or like 858 be rationalized or withdrawn? And the answer is no. And that's because 117, it pretty much feeds from like Sembawang to like inside Canberra a little bit, and then it comes out, goes to Yishun, Khatib, and then it just, okay, this is probably not a good diagram, but it's like, it's supposed to like go to Seletar Airport, and then from Seletar Airport, it goes to Jalan Kayu, TPE, and then Punggol Field. It used to be Punggol Central, but now it's Punggol Field, and then towards Punggol, and then it's gonna be extended up to Punggol Coast. So because of the Punggol Coast extension for service 117, this is something that like 117 offers that CRLe doesn't offer in any way, or wouldn't offer in any way even if it were to be extended to Seletar Airport. And it's also good to have like a backup option in case CRLe poofs out. Because it's like 117 is like a doorstep service and it's like way more convenient for you to like take the bus instead of like, I don't know, transferring MRT like so many times, like I don't know, once over here and then another time over here to reach like Punggol Coast. And I mean, it's quite self-explanatory. Punggol Coast, there is a university there, so having another bus there, it's not gonna hurt anyone. So it is highly unlikely that 117 would ever be like rationalized in any way. And then I've also heard about people saying stuff like, hey, you know what about 858? It's like, it cuts through Yishun, Khatib, and then this thing just like pretty much parallels CRLe. Okay, the first thing is it's not parallel because 858 serves this TPE bus stop. There are things that are like, okay, what am I saying? It's like there is this concept of like train hubs, meaning Outram Park, Dhoby Ghat, Marina Bay. It's like a major interchange. So that's what a train hub means. But we're not going into that. And that's pretty like basic stuff. Bus hubs are something like you have this one major bus stop. Sometimes it's along the expressway. In this case, it's like TPE bus stops, and even Trellis Towers is also another bus stop. And I would even argue that Jalan Koyam Air, which is the transfer point between 23 and 966, that's also a minor bus hub. So because 858 serves this hub, and it doesn't even go anywhere near CRLe, people from Yishun and Khatib or even Sembawang, they would rather take 858 all the way to Changi Airport, because you have to realize that CRLe feeds to Pasir Ris and you transfer to like CRL. And CRL only takes you to Changi Airport Terminal 5. It doesn't even let you access like PTB 3/1/2 basement drive, which is where all the airport workers that's where they usually alight, and that's where they usually board the bus to go home. And because of this, just because you introduce like a new MRT line, it doesn't necessarily mean that like you have to rationalize a bus. Okay, of course, like things that like duplicate like a lot, maybe they would probably get rationalized, but I'm just telling you that 117 and 858, they serve really really different purposes, and they are not meant to like compete with each other. So just because there is an MRT line in this general direction and there is another bus route in this general direction, yes, they're parallel, but they are not competing in any way. They are just doing, you know, different jobs. They're serving different purposes. It's the whole like 190, 972 and DTL argument. It's exactly the same thing. I've talked about this before, that like 190 is meant to be a fast way from Choa Chu Kang and Teck Whye to Orchard, and then 972 it does the same thing, but except that it feeds like Segar, Fajar, like the whole Bukit Panjang, Ring Road, the entire neighborhood. It brings them to Orchard, and then DTL brings them to like Newton, Little India, and the CBD. So it's completely different purposes, especially because Downtown Line doesn't serve like Orchard or Somerset or Dhoby Ghat. And it's just as simple as that. It's it's along a horizontal line, like generally horizontal, but it's not competing in any way. And I hope you guys understand this. And the other thing to like take into account is that Singapore is not Japan. Japan branches, but they have like different reasons why they branch, and you cannot just apply it to Singapore. I know Jurong region line branches, but that's because it's like a merger of different LRT lines, Jurong LRT or something along those lines. I don't know, but the thing is that like with major MRT lines like this in Singapore, you don't want them to like branch a lot. I know that there is like a stacked separate platform for this CRLe, but honestly, you just want to reduce like the amount of branching. You can at most extend this to Seletar Airport, and that's it. Don't just like go crazy and extend this all the way till like Yishun, Khatib, or Woodlands North, or Canberra, or whatever. It just defeats the purpose of it. Which is like kind of the same thing with Tuas South Extension. Oh my god. So like for Tuas South Extension, instead of like just creating an East-West line branch line for no reason, it might be more worth it to like Tawas Pengkang Hill. You might want to extend Jurong Region line to like Tuas South instead. I mean, Jurong Region line more or less serves like industrial. It more or less like fetches people from like I forgot where this is. I think it's like Jurong Pier or something along those lines. Jurong Pier, Jurong Port. I honestly forgot. I think Jurong Port is like Cross Island Line. Okay, but it's probably Jurong Pier, because there's already like industrial demand. Like might as well just send this thing to like Tuas South instead of just making an EWL branch line. It's like the reason why they got rid of the Changi Airport branch line is because it's a headache when it comes to like timetable, launching trains, and withdrawing trains. So okay, I'm just saying like in the context of Singapore, you unless it's something like JRL or where you have no choice like engineering constraints like Circle Line, don't branch them. And even if you branch them, don't, just don't go crazy with your branches in general. And I know I'm kind of going off topic, but like in Singapore, we have train branches, and then even the buses in Singapore kind of like branch out also, like 660M, 660, stuff like that. And in Japan, like the buses really branch out like a lot more. It's like they can have this, and this. It's actually crazy. You can just search up wrinkle bus, oops, wrinkle bus, and then you look at like the Kawasaki area. You would see all the industrial estate buses. They branch a lot, and sometimes this kind of branching isn't really efficient when it's like high density. Low density it might work, but yeah, I'm just saying there is like some sort of branching for buses, but it doesn't necessarily work every single time. It depends on context. And then it's the same for trains as well. And then I'm possibly like diverging from this too much, but I just want to point out the fact that like some people have claimed that buses in Japan are like, they take you from one, it's not called MRT, they just call it train station or like subway station. But like people have made like the false assumption that the routes in Japan, the bus routes in Japan are like they take you from one train station to the other, and I'm telling you that that's not the case. This is only true like for an average of like I think around 40% of bus routes that okay like 40% of bus routes that originate from any major train station or even minor train station, they start here and then they pretty much just end in the middle of nowhere, and then they turn around. So it's kind of like sometimes they do loop as well. So they can have stuff like bi-directional feeders, they can have unidirectional feeders as well. Sorry, what am I talking about? They can have bi-directional feeders, they can have feeders that loop, and then Menkyo Iji Rosen, they can even have like several exclusive routes that only run like certain certain times of the day. They are unidirectional, but that's rare. I'm just saying that like most of the routes they just start at one point and then they end in the middle of nowhere, and they don't necessarily have to start from a major train station. I have seen routes that just start from the middle of nowhere and end in the middle of nowhere as well. That's also pretty common, especially in like prefectures outside of the Tokyo metropolitan area. They don't necessarily have a lot of like um you know train connections. It's basically like a comparison would be something similar to 272, 273. They bring you to Bukit Merah, and Bukit Merah has no MRT. So it's like just one bus hub, and then it goes to its looping point, it loops, or it's bi-directional, and the off service, and it loops back to, that kind of concept. But I just want to point out that, like, this whole MRT to a different MRT, this whole train station to a different train station for bus routes, it doesn't happen like that often. And people who claim this are flat out lying. However, there are some exceptions. Shibuya is one exception. You have Tokyo buses that bring you to the Tokyo lines. You have Odakyu buses that bring you to Odakyu train station lines. And you also have like stuff that's parallel to I think it was like Denin Toshi line or something along, yeah. And then there is also stuff that like parallels what is it called, Tokyo Toyoko line, I think it's this. And then there's also stuff that bring you to also along Toyoko line or Meguro line, there's like this, I think. And then there's all these like KO buses that bring you to KO Inokashira line, or some of them they bring you to Odakyu as well. I honestly forgot already that there are like lots of buses in Shibuya. It's like one big bus interchange. There's like a west area and an east area. The east area, like most Toei buses park there, and then I think Tokyo Bus 72 parks there, and then everything else, Tokyo, Keio, Odakyu, and even this really long route to, where does it go again? Is it Chofu Station? I forgot. You get the idea. And then another comparison between buses in Singapore versus buses in Japan. So Singapore is only one of the countries that have this concept of like transfer, but Japan doesn't have it because they are all privatized, and only how do you call it? Only Toei bus, or like Yokohama City bus, or like municipal bus, they are like flat fare, and everything else their fares are like in stages. And then Yokohama City bus, or Yokohama municipal bus, they transferred some of their like routes to Kanagawa Chuo bus, also in short Kanachu. uh, Basically, if you see Kanachu with all the single digit bus routes, like for example 1, 5, or even like 115, I think there's like 30 as well, 40. I can't remember all of them. I cannot remember all of them, but like basically all. Okay, what am I talking about? I'm not talking about single digit. I'm talking about the bus routes that don't have any, like, any kanji character attached to them. Like, they're just numbers. If you see such routes from Kanachu, it means that they have been transferred over from Yokohama, and the flat fare carried over. So Kanachu is like, it's mostly fare stages, but those routes that are purely numbers, they they charge flat fare, even for long distance. And when I'm talking about like long distance, Kanagawa as a prefecture that contains like Enoshima, Kamakura, Yokohama, what's that other famous place, Hakone. They are more bus dependent than Tokyo, like prefecture in general. I'm talking about like Tokyo's 23 wards, and not talking about West Tokyo. West Tokyo is another different thing. But in Kanagawa, there are like long distance bus routes. It's like long distance, medium distance, and feeders. But there's like a greater percentage of like medium or long distance routes that take about 1 hour or 1 hour 30 minutes. Like when it comes to runtime, in just one direction, it's pretty much the same as Singapore buses, if you would put it that way. Because there is this stereotype that buses in Japan are short. I mean, a larger percentage of them are feeder buses, but that doesn't mean that the long commuter bus services, I'm not talking about reserved seat, but long commuter bus services on what do you call that? City buses, not coaches. They exist as well, and a lot of them exist in like Kanagawa as well. The reason why Singapore runs way more long distance buses as compared to Japan is because Singapore's roads are much wider. Japan's roads are so narrow, and it is like, unless you're like traveling on like the national route or something, or the expressway, which is like even rarer because a lot of city buses, commuter buses, don't even use the expressways, with the exception of Mizonokuchi to Shin Yokohama, I think. They don't even travel on the expressways. Maybe on national routes, yes. And there is like a bigger tendency for those that travel on national routes to go longer distance. But in general, because buses in Japan, they are like, the roads in Japan, they are way more narrow and a lot more difficult to navigate. It's like quite tiring when it comes to driving. So they don't really want to make their um bus drivers like drive for long distances without any good reason. Okay, good reason meaning the bus service is there so that you can skip the annoying train crowds, or the annoying transfers, especially when you have to walk long distances. Unless it's like that kind of case, or in the case of like Fukutoshin line being so deep that they have to introduce like bus services like Ikebukuro 86 to parallel it, so it's way more convenient for commuters. Okay, if they have no special reason to run like medium or long distance bus routes, given the narrow roads, they just wouldn't, and they are like kind of profit driven as well. It's kind of like waste oil if you would put it in Singapore terms, I guess. And then having said that, let's take a look at West Tokyo. It's like, okay, you got JR's Chuo line, you have Keio's main line, and then you kind of have Odakyu line, Denentoshi line, as well as Tokyu Toyoko line, Tokyu Meguro line, and then there is let me see, Seibu Shinjuku line, and Seibu Ikebukuro line. I'm just gonna use red even though that's not the official color. This one is Tokorozawa where they intersect, and then there's also like Tobu Tojo line. So as you can see for West Tokyo or like Saitama, the trains they run horizontally, and aside from like Tama monorail and some of the Seibu feeder lines, you see like the trains they cut through horizontally, and all the buses they cut through like vertically. So it's sort of like the areas that the trains cannot reach, they use buses to cover it, and it's like they just want you to like know that like even Seibu has drawn out a like rough route diagram for buses, and then the time taken from like place to place sort of thing. So basically, even in like West Tokyo, they are actually this bus dependent. It's not like the kind of like stereotype that people sort of propagate, saying that like, buses feed passengers to the major trains or minor train stations, and then they hub spoke to the train. Okay, that's only true to a certain extent, but even in West Tokyo, you can see like the role of like bus services when it comes to all these like vertical connections. And the thing is, it's not just vertical. Some of them they go diagonal. Some of them even run parallel to the train lines as well, even though I honestly think there should be more parallel ones. And the other thing to take note is that aside from like expressway buses that are like coach buses, there are like almost like there's like little to no bus routes that cross prefectures. Only a few do, and the reason is because of paperwork. Like when you introduce or withdraw a bus service, you need to seek permission from like not just the prefectural ward, but like the individual city offices as well. So the more cities you cut through, the more you have to seek permission for them to like not just introduce a bus route, but to put in place all the infrastructure that's required to like run the bus service, like minimally, I'm saying, a bus stop pole, which costs money and stuff. So I know there's like some Keisei buses, like I think it was like this series, and then it's like co-run by Tobu as well. I honestly cannot remember which one is which, but basically there are some exceptions that they actually cross the border, but I'm just saying it's quite rare, and that's also kind of the reason why you don't really have a lot of long distance bus routes in Japan. But Kanagawa they have a lot because it's all within the same prefecture, minus Machida, because Machida, despite being so near Kanagawa, is still within Tokyo prefecture, but that one's honestly an exception. It's just the way the city boundaries are being drawn. So yeah, if basically you guys can just remember this place called Machida. So basically this area is in Tokyo, but it's so near Kanagawa that even I sometimes mistake it as being a part of Kanagawa prefecture. This is also the same for like Nagatsuta, Minami Machida, Granbury Park, and stuff like this. Sagamihara, I don't know. I don't even know if that's from Tokyo or Kanagawa. So in general, this area over here is like pretty much train dependent, and so is like Tohoku a bit. But it's like when you go to like Kyoto or Osaka. By the way, it's not pronounced Osaka, it's Osaka. So, or if you go to like this area known as Shikoku or Okinawa, they generally become like more bus dependent and their routes tend to be longer. And Hokkaido in general, because the population density is quite low, they don't have that many train lines, so they run a lot of bus. So just remember that Hokkaido, Okinawa, Kyoto, or like Kanagawa, they are very, very bus dependent. I'm not sure about Aomori and Akita, like that general area, or like Tohoku, like Sendai, Morioka, Yachinohe, that general area, or Mutsu Peninsula. Am I even saying the correct thing? But whatever, you can just take it that Hokkaido, Okinawa, Kyoto, Kanagawa, they are like quite bus dependent. And it's not true whatever people are saying. Hey, Japan's like a train paradise. They only take trains, they don't take bus. Another reason why I think Japan should run more buses is because this line sucks. The rapid sucks because the trains keep emergency braking for I don't know what reason, and then the local trains, the so-called rapid trains, have to yield to all the limited express and like free trains as well, and that it causes delay. But it's normal. I mean, like, this line gets delayed so often, and then this line is like really, really overcrowded. And at night, the frequencies get really bad, and you squeeze in the train until you cannot breathe. So I would rather have parallel buses that run along Chiyoda line or like Joban line. I wish there was one bus that crossed the border from Kanamachi to Matsudo, because I hate taking train. And the problem is not with the Kita Ayase branch line. Because like the how do I put this? Even before Kita Ayase branch, like the true services from Chiyoda line, even before the true services were a thing, all the short working trips they terminated at Ayase instead of Ayase North, Kita Ayase. And because of that, like only like, you know, one in two or one in okay, maybe 1 in 2, 1 in 3 in severe cases, or like 2 in 3 trains, they go to Joban Line local. I mean, Chiyoda Line through service to Joban Line local. And when you get the 1 in 3, the Abiko bound bus or the Kashiwa bound bus or the Matsudo bound, the Abiko bound train or the Kashiwa bound train or the Matsudo bound train is bound to get really, really crowded, and I hate that. It's like 15 to 20 minutes frequency at night, come on. And Yamanote line is not the most important line in Japan or in the world. If Joban line dies, the whole northeast of like Tokyo and Chiba, I'm just gonna name all the stations because people are so ignorant. I'll just start from Ayase, Kameari, Kanamachi, Matsudo, Kita Matsudo, Mabashi, Shin Matsudo, Kita Kogane, and Minami Kashiwa, Kashiwa, Kita Kashiwa, Abiko, Tennodai, Toride. Let's just forget all of Ibaraki Prefecture, even though I really pity them because their train services are really pathetic. But you get it. Those people, Tsukuba Express is way too far for them, like way up north, and then they don't even have an option besides Joban Line Rapid and Joban Line Local. If both of them were to get like suspended for any reason, the whole northeast just cannot go to work at all. And that's why Yamanote line is by no means the most important line in Japan. I mean, like, yes, it feeds people from the minor stations to the major stations, and also it's kind of convenient if you don't want to squeeze on Shonan Shinjuku line or Saikyo line during peak hours. You can take Yamanote line. The crowd is still there, but it's like relatively not as bad. But it's like it is by no means like the most important line. It is just a hub spoke line. to the major stations is not even like that important at all. And I would even argue that like Chuo line or like Chuo line, what am I talking about? Like, I hate this. Sobu line, Chuo line, or Chuo line local or Sobu line local, this one is way more important because it's like the only horizontal line that like cuts through. And if that line poofs out, you have to rely on the buses that feed like vertically so that you can reach KO line, and then on this side you can reach KO line as okay, KEIYO and KEIO, KO, KYO, U. So are Japanese trains on time? Most of the time, I would say 80 to 85%, except like Tokaido line, Ueno Tokyo line, Shonan Shinjuku line, Takasaki line, Utsunomiya line, which is part of like the big Tohoku main line. It's like a 4-hour journey, and it's like it's sardined with people, and obviously there are going to be delays every day. I'm not counting that, but okay, in general, most trains in Japan, okay, just say 80 to 95% of the time they are on time. But the issue with Japan is with automation and frequency and cut costs. They aren't necessarily the best railway in the world. Is it extensive, especially within Tokyo City Center? Yes. But that doesn't mean that the railway system is good. I'm just putting it out there in case people take my words out of context, or if people claim to be like, I visited Japan a lot of times and I stayed within the Yamanote line and I think it is the best line in the entire world and you cannot tell me otherwise. I am a seasoned veteran traveler to Japan and I don't care what the locals have to say.